This is NEGOTIATEx TV.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on the NEGOTIATEx podcast. We are continuing our conversation with best-selling negotiation author and expert, Keld Jensen. If you haven't already checked out part A of the show, be sure to do that first. Let's jump in the conversation with Keld.
Now, emotions, personal chemistry, that was one tool in chapter 3 where you cover a number of tools and you've named them elements. We're not going through all of them. Sorry, folks. I know you'd probably love, but that's why you got to go pick up the book so you can get all 103. Keld, do you have a personal favorite from chapter 3 where you talk about all these tools? We hit on emotions already, so sorry if we stole it, but is there a personal favorite, or is there one in there in particular you said, I'm going to give this to the listeners as a little nugget. This one, take this, exploit it, use it, and you're going to improve significantly in your next negotiation?
There's so many. I mean, it's what's an important one?
So you were harassing me earlier about having so many kids, right? It's like you've got 103 children. So how do you pick your favorite?
Yeah, it was back to my kids. I was listening to a conversation. My oldest son came to my wife just last week and said, "Which of us do you love the most?" And my wife, being a brilliant negotiator, looked at him and said, "I dislike all of you at the same level." And I just love that answer because, she didn't prioritize one of them, and there wasn't one that I love more than the other. I dislike all of you. So, and he just said, "Oh, okay," and walked away. He was obviously hoping to be named the one that was loved the most.
Well, if you can't come up with one, I've got one. I'll ask you to kind of pull on the thread on, which is negotiating non-negotiables. It's always an interesting term when we're sitting down at a table and, isn't everything negotiable? But how do you navigate the non-negotiables?
It's actually a great one because quite often you are back to big organizations negotiating with small organizations, right? Big organizations they're world champions in saying this is non-negotiable. This is our standard contract. We cannot negotiate that. And sometimes you're sitting there wondering, is anything negotiable? Because they just claim everything is just like a standard and this is the standard contract. So you're absolutely right. And it's a great question because is there stuff that is non-negotiable? Of course there is. Something that is controlled by law is non-negotiable, right? But besides that, stuff is negotiable. And what I often talk about, I think we mentioned that at our last podcast, is that we need to negotiate on how to negotiate before we start negotiating. So even before we sit down with the counterpart, I would actually have them in a more relaxed format, share with us, is there anything that you can't negotiate and why? They have to explain why. And it's a standard thing, is not an answer. Is it because there's a cost associated with it that you don't like to pick up? Is there a risk you can calculate? What is the reason that you're not able to negotiate this thing? And perhaps it is non-negotiable. Then we just need to park it. But we need to understand why is it non-negotiable? Because most stuff is actually negotiable. And quite often I see negotiators that are just saying, we can't negotiate that. And the reason they won't negotiate it is because they have a cost associated with changing that variable, right? But when you make them admit what it is, then they might be sharing, well, I have a cost of $5,000 by changing it. That's why it's non-negotiable. And then you might say, well, back to the talk about economics. Well, that's wonderful because my benefit is $10,000. So if I compensate you $5,000, then you're not suffering. And I can utilize the benefit on my side. So suddenly it becomes negotiable. But that is actually related to something else. Now you're just asking if I have a favorite. And one of them, which is really important for all of us in the world right now, is the ability to listen. I think as human beings, we have kind of lost the ability to really listen. And by really listening, I mean not listening to prepare what you want to say, but actually understand what it is the counterpart is saying. I'm often using the phrase, replace the word, what the counterpart is saying, replace the word from the counterpart with the sound of a cash register. So when somebody raises a topic saying, I would be interested in changing delivery time, don't say, no, that's not impossible, that's non-negotiable. Or don't say, sure, we can do that. Ask a question. What is the value to you by doing it? Because the second a negotiator raises a topic, it's because they have a financial interest. Otherwise, they wouldn't raise that topic. And your challenge as a negotiator is figuring out what is that value behind their request? What is that cost that makes them turn down that variable? So really, really listening is important. We have in the world of negotiation, we have a wonderful expert Dr. Dan Shapiro at Harvard, who is talking a lot about that. I love whatever he's doing in his book. I can only recommend his work. And he talks about that he feels that we are tribal more than ever. We put ourselves in groups that we agree with, and then everybody else is stupid. They're idiots because they disagree with us. And I honestly feel disagreement is healthy because disagreement create progress. If we all just sit down and agree about everything all the time, we're not moving anywhere. So disagreement is a good thing, but we need to understand empathy, and we need to show empathy as well to understand that you may, Nolan, have a different opinion than me. I respect your opinion, but I disagree, and then we can agree to disagree or do whatever. But I think we moved back to what Dr. Dan Shapiro said. We moved into a world where the second Nolan disagree with me, I'm just sitting here going da 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 da. Now I don't even want to listen to him because he's obviously dumb. Anyway, long answer again, but that would probably be one of my favorite, the listening part, and the non-negotiable is very important.
Do you find the power of reciprocity plays into listening? That if you said, if you're tuning Nolan out, la 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 la, does he end up doing the same with you? And then vice versa. If you create space and you demonstrate that you're actually listening, is it more likely he's going to hear you?
That's a great question. I would doubt it. I think that back to negotiate, how to negotiate. I think, and a lot of people, when I say that, look at me like I just arrived from another planet. I often say we have to sit down and discuss how we want to negotiate, including the listening part. What do we do when we disagree? What do we do if trust is declining? Are we allowed to verbalize that? Are we allowed to verbalize that we disagree and how we disagree? And what should we do when we reach disagreement? What happens if personal chemistry is not working out? Should we verbalize that as well? So to me, really, now it sounds really weird what I'm going to share with you guys right now. A lot of the stuff I'm sharing in this book is actually a waste of time if you understand what I mean. Because in my world, negotiation is really not playing a lot of tactics or tricks or trying to outmaneuver the counterpart. It's not a hostage negotiation. We're sitting down, two organizations trying to create and distribute value. And the best way of doing that is just talking person to person. Just, remove all the crap, be honest and transparent without becoming naive, and just treat it as a brainstorming exercise. How can we make 2 + 2 equal more than 4? Now, can all negotiations be like that? Obviously not. I'm not dumb. So you will have a lot of negotiation that will stay in positional negotiation, zero sum, one win at the expense of the counterpart. And for that type of negotiation, a lot of the stuff in this book is extremely relevant. But if you are in what we call a perfect partnership negotiation, which is basically partnership 2.0, you don't need a lot of the tools because you have agreed that we're just sitting down here and we're being transparent. We will share our cost and values, and our purpose is really to generate success for you, but not at my expense. I often tell our clients, start the negotiation by saying the following to the counterpart. I'm here today to help you reduce your risk, cost, and liabilities and help you improve your profit. Are you interested in me helping you doing that? What happens all the time when we do this in reality is the counterpart is quiet for a moment, then they say yes, because they are maybe a little suspicious, but they will say yes. And then you move on by saying, wonderful. And I believe that your purpose here today is help me reduce my cost, risk, and liabilities and help me improve my profit. Are you willing to do that? And if we can agree on that, we are sincere and honest, then we have just moved the whole negotiation to a different level. Because now we move it from this positional game into collaboration, where we're really sitting there to figure out how can we create value. Now, the next challenge is then when we have created value, then we need to agree on how to split that. And that could turn into something nasty, but that's a whole different story.
When we work with our clients, we always ask them, hey, learn something from that last negotiation and improve it. I know you talk about your post-negotiation audits. What are some things that you ask them to reflect on and improve before the next negotiation?
I think it's a great, wonderful advice that you give your clients, because that is really important. I mean, sitting down, evaluate a negotiation after you're done is really essential. Everything is not only the outcome, because negotiators have a tendency, I don't know whether you agree with me, guys, they have a tendency just to focus on the outcome. Hey, we made $1 million. Oh, okay, well, that's wonderful. But how was the process? Are you happy with the process? How was the trust level? Did you utilize the value? Did you go through the agenda? Was it calm? Did you create a good chemistry? And what I find, and I guess you guys are doing the same thing, so it's great that you're doing what you're doing, but it's really important that people go through a process. What I'm always saying is that when you board a plane and the door to the flight deck is open, you'll see the pilot sitting out there with the checklist, right? And every time I board a plane, I'm thinking, is that the first time that he's flying this plane? Why is that why he's sitting with a checklist? Because he's no clue on how to do it. And obviously not. He's been flying that plane 3,000 times before, but he knows, and the airline industry knows, and the FAA knows that he have to sit with that checklist because human beings forget. So the same thing goes with a pre-negotiation checklist and a post-negotiation checklist. We need checklists to memorize and remember what is it that we need to do before we negotiate, and what is it we need to revisit afterwards. So that's why we created pre and post negotiation checklists that are in the book as well.
Yeah, you talk about process, trust, value as other considerations. The other one is, what does this thing look like during implementation? Is that something else you cover in the checklist? Where else do you think about, all right, made a deal, now 6 months down the road, are milestones being hit? Are we meeting those metrics? Where else do you address that?
That's a wonderful question, really is, because I use another term, and that is that a contract is just a pause in the negotiation process, right? Way too often, I find that negotiators, they think that negotiation ended when we signed the contract. And I often provoke organizations by saying, no, now we're really starting. Because yes, we have agreed on the terms of the contract, but as you said, what is going to happen 6 months down the road when one party suddenly are not able to fulfill what they promised in the contract, or something is delayed, or cost is increasing? Well, here we go, round 2 of negotiations. And those negotiations are sometimes even more serious than the first one, because now you are depending on each other. And I cannot recommend going to court because that's the waste of everybody's time. So you have to figure it out. A very recent study I just saw actually claimed that more than 90% of disagreements between companies in the US is actually not going to court. So people are negotiating to figure out a deal before going to court, even though they disagree about the content of the contract, which to me is good news. I think that's great that so many actually figure out that they need to negotiate the conflict instead of just going to court. Because what is happening in a court case, the judge will conclude, and he or she will decide who's a winner and a loser. And the funny part about a court case, have you guys ever thought about that? If you lose in a court case, you're not leaving thinking, okay, fair enough, I was wrong. You're not doing that. You're leaving the courthouse thinking the judge was an idiot. They didn't see what we saw. So you have not repaired the relationship. So it's actually just getting back on track. It's actually great news that 90% of all conflicts are being negotiated. But again, it just shows you that the need for negotiation post-contract is huge, and perhaps even bigger than pre-contract negotiation. So I love what you said there. The 6 months down the line is so important to predict and understand how you need to negotiate that.
Element 73 is navigating the cosmos of negotiation. Lessons from John Glenn's insight. Keld, I had no idea that astronaut John Glenn was such a influence on our world of negotiation. Care to explain?
Yes, there's a lot of interesting comments there. And one of the comments is that, several astronauts have actually been saying that why I am shot off to space, I'm just sitting there thinking that every piece of this rocket has been supplied by the cheapest supplier. And I just love that comment because, there's a tendency. I'm actually doing a big research right now where we're comparing bidding and negotiation. Is there actually a value difference whether you are in a bidding war, you're doing a tender and a traditional bidding competition, or you negotiate every single deal? And I was actually inspired by a rather old Stanford study that clearly identified that negotiation was superior to auctions and dash bidding. It's back from the 80s. So I'm basically being inspired and repeating that study because you see that so many organizations, not only here in North America, but around the world, have a tendency just to issue a bidding war and say, okay, we need to buy a new component for this rocket ship, and the cheapest supplier is going to get the order, right? That's the requirement. There might be some technical requirements as well, but let's just say they have filtered out the 4 suppliers they believe that can do it correctly. And the cheapest one is getting the order. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I've been advising the construction industry for years. And in Europe, I don't know how it is in North America, but in Europe, there's something called the 15% rule. And it's an unspoken rule that basically means that everybody knows that the proposal you're getting will increase by 15% when the contract is signed. So, the construction company will find a way to increase everything by 15% because otherwise they're not making a profit. But they know they have to go lower in order to get the contract. So it's basically about cheating each other all the time. So back to what you said right here, it's really important to understand the risk of cheat. There's actually a book written on it. What is the consequences of cheat for society and for all of us? That is really essential reading as well. It's a German author, I forgot his name right now, that wrote about the consequences of just focusing on cheat all the time. So anyway, long story again, but that was just back to the impact of astronauts and negotiating.
I love it.
Didn't think we were going to go there today. That's awesome. I know that you also discussed this concept of ultimate level in negotiation. What does this level represent, and how can negotiators reach negotiation mastery?
Yes, I tried to build the 103 elements up in a way where you slowly add one layer to another. Now, the great thing about this book, I think, is that you don't need to start in chapter 1 and then read chapter 2 and chapter 3. You could actually start in chapter 7 and then return to chapter 2 and then jump into element number 73 and go back to element 14. So you don't have to read it from page 1 to page 300 and how many pages there are in the book. And except for this one, because when you move into that, the mastery level, you really need to be able to look yourself in the mirror and acknowledge that I can do everything else now. So I know all the other elements. I'm pretty good at it. You can wake me 4 o'clock in the morning and I can just repeat all of them because I know them by heart and I can practice them as well. Then, and only then, you can then move up to that level where it becomes a little bit more holistic, actually returning a little bit more to my previous book, Negotiation Essential, where we're talking more about the strategy choices, how do you as an organization want to negotiate in general, and less on the tools. So the ultimate level is really where you focused on, I'm capable of doing everything else. Now I want to be in the 5% group, the absolutely best negotiators. And that's when I start studying that one. So I wouldn't start with that chapter. I would finish up with that one.
So in that chapter, you do discuss the power of teaching for enhancing our own negotiation skills. I love it when a former student will come back to me and say, hey, I have an opportunity to lead some professional development, training in my organization. Do you mind if I get some of those slides or something from way back in the day, because I got to lead this session? Talk to me about the power of when we become teachers of this material and not just practitioners.
Oh, yeah, I know. I love that. I mean, that is I think it's wonderful when that happens. It's great, as you said, when you have a student come back to you and asking for that, because then we're spreading a message, right? We are spreading knowledge, and that's really what we want to do. I often say, and I repeat that all the time, I don't have a job. I'm sincere about it. I have a mission. I really sincerely want us to improve the way we negotiate and collaborate, and we can do that. I see that every single day. That's really what makes me wake up in the morning. Beside my kids. So it's really about spreading that message and make people understand not only how important negotiation is. Now, when I started this journey in 1998, negotiation was considered a soft skill. So it was something, if you have nothing else to do, you would study negotiation. Change takes time. And thank God I can report today that in 2024, it has moved up to being recognized as a truly important, heavy skill set from top managers around the world. McKinsey did a study last year among Fortune 500 CEOs here in the US, and 93% of them said that negotiation was so important. So within the next 3 years, they would establish a chief negotiation officer. And 96 out of those 93, they said that they believed that they could increase earnings by 5% by doing so. So the great thing about negotiation is that it's really moved from being that soft skills into a central spot where every organization recognizes it as something that can really move profits, earnings, interest, relationship, and all of that. So spreading that message that when you have that experience, a student come back to you and ask for the slide, it's the best recommendation you can get, because there's some knowledge that they're going to spread. And we need that, because it's not enough that you and I are doing it. We need hundreds and thousands of people to spread the message internally, because we don't have the time to do it. So I can only applaud that and say I think it's wonderful.
Yeah, your book wraps up with a beautiful call to action, which really kind of echoes what you were just saying. And I know we still got a couple questions left to ask you, but I just got to read this, which is your 103rd element is the call to action. It's an invitation to start questioning the norms, to see negotiation not as a confrontation, but as a collaborative process of exploration and problem solving. And by doing so, you open up a world of possibilities where you have the power to influence outcomes, create value, and forge stronger relationships. I agree, Keld. It is a beautiful thing when it's not just us out there sounding this, training this, teaching this, but we have the others joining us in that process.
Keld, you conclude your book with a chapter on the foundational elements of negotiation. When we typically hear of the foundation, we would typically think of it occurring first. Is there a reason you discuss the foundation towards the end of the book?
Yeah, it is. It is a great question. And I was actually thinking about it myself when I wrapped up the book, because the way I write a book is I don't start from chapter 1. I may start in chapter 7 and then finish that and then go to chapter 3. It's a whole mess when I'm doing a book. But and the reason that foundation is placed where it is, it's because it's really a no-brainer. It's something that it's so obvious that I was thinking, should I even put it in the book? And one of the things is I'm saying, do you love to negotiate? You should ask yourself that question, because what I have found is that a lot of negotiators who is not good at it, if you actually ask them and they answer honestly, they're not good at it because they don't like to negotiate. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners today, if we ask them honestly, do you actually like to negotiate? Some of them will admit, no, I actually don't. I dislike it. It's a confrontation. It's unpleasant. I don't like it. And I can only say, well, if you don't like it, you're never going to be really good at it. Because can we all agree as human beings, we are good at something we actually enjoy and like. Now, can we all have a shitty negotiation once or twice a year? Obviously, I certainly do. But in general, we should actually like it. So what I'm always doing, working with a client, before doing anything else, I'm always asking them, are you looking forward to our negotiation on Tuesday next week? And if they say, no, not really, I would rather sit here and work on the spreadsheet, because it could turn nasty. And okay, then I put down a little note in my notebook saying this is probably not going to be that great. But on the other hand, if I meet a client who's saying, responding to the same question, yes, it's going to be great. I've been sitting in the office way too long. I want to get out there and, box with the counterpart, create some value and do stuff like that. Ooh, I'm excited. Then I normally put down a little note saying this is probably going to be really successful. And quite often I'm right. Because when we like something, as I said earlier, we become good at it. So what I'm also trying to do in this world is actually change the mindset of how people perceive negotiation. And let me share a little secret with you guys, is quite often I find that people who dislike to negotiate don't actually know what negotiation could be and should be. They just see it as a conflict, confrontation, all zero sum. And if your whole world is zero sum negotiation, now if you love confrontation, that's wonderful. But if you don't, then it's going to be a nightmare. So that's why the foundation is, to me, something that is obvious. So if you love negotiation, I shouldn't even say that, you're going to be good at it. So the foundation is something that should just be in place even before we do anything.
Keld,
thank you.
Keld, we have hit maybe, 10 out of your 103 elements. Folks, you're going to need to go pick up the book to get the other 93. But Keld, as always, this has been a very enjoyable conversation. As we prepare to conclude, is there anything else you would like to leave the audience with? One
more thing that's very important, and that is for those who choose to pick up the book, there's actually a free workbook we have created as well, 50 pages, where you can work back to learning and training. So you can actually practice a lot of the stuff in the book, and you can use the chapters in the book to develop your own negotiation process and improve your tools as well. So if you want the workbook, the book is launching August 27th. So if you want that, just go to the book launch page, connect on LinkedIn, and you'll get the workbook for free.
Wonderful. Well, Keld, thanks for sharing your work with us. We know you produce a new book about every 6 months. All right, so we're going to be looking for you again in about 6 months to come on again. This is like hosting Saturday Night Live, right? How many times can you make it back? But we'd sure love to have you on again. And thanks again for just for sharing some of the ideas and so many more we didn't get to. So we'll certainly have to have you back again.
Thank you for having me. I enjoy it.
Well, that is it for us today on the podcast. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the NEGOTIATEx podcast, and we'll see you in the next episode. Hey, thanks for checking out this video on NEGOTIATEx TV. If you found any value at all, please hit the subscribe button, hit the notification icon if you want to be notified of future videos, and then we also have a couple videos over here that you might be interested in checking out. If you and your small business, your team, are looking to get negotiations or leadership training, then you can head over to NEGOTIATEx.com and learn more about the coaching services we offer. Thanks, and I'll see you over in the next video.